Cincinnati is not a chapter of the Black Lives Matter national grouping. And the national grouping that's known as Black Lives Matter is not the movement for black liberation. The black liberation movement and the impetus for it came directly out of struggles in city after city against police brutality and the outrage that was seen, the killing of Trayvon Martin, Mike Brown, Eric Garner, and others. This movement is much broader than an individual organization that kind of rose to popularity through a hashtag. And the politics that they represent is only a slice of the movement as a whole, even though the media projects it otherwise. And even though the media misnames this new movement for black liberation the Black Lives Matter movement, it is not that. It's not what it is. There are groupings around the country who have different names and have different politics and different ideas. We're one of those. It started around the same time. We were inspired by the name Black Lives Matter, and so we use that name. But once the politics began to be flushed out about what that organization is, we realized that we're not on the same page on a number of things. So we began to build our own set of principles for what we think a liberation movement should stand for. So you have that now. You have an idea. You can look through it. On the other side, there's a calendar. Half the things have already happened, but the other half are yet to happen, just for your own use. And we actually use this when we go door-to-door canvassing around the city, encouraging people to get involved with the movement. And so people want to discuss anything about these principles, why we adopted this or that one of them, or anything like that, that's open for discussion too. So that was one accomplishment, is for us to solidify our political stance on the world and where we fit and where you fit. Another thing is, which comes from our principles, is supporting other struggles. We in the last year organized, which people saw on TV or maybe some even participated in this room, a 5,000 strong march in the city, and we're able to mobilize something in the realm of 12,000 people this year in physical political protest, which I think is an important piece of what we do. We do this because it's twofold. We think that you change, you transform when you get out on the streets with other people in unison demanding something. Because for our whole lives, we are not taught what our real power is. Our real power is our numbers, and there's another side of it. Our power as numbers and our power as producers, I believe. But we are not taught those things. You go out together and you see, wow, there's even if you go to a march and it's 300, like a small march, you look around and you say, I didn't realize this many people thought this way. You hear cars honking, people coming by giving you the thumbs up. I didn't think there were that many people who thought this way. Or you might be somebody who's black, who's been fighting for a long time against racism, even on your individual level. You might, for the first time, see dozens of white people who also support the struggle with you, alongside you. These things deeply impact us as individuals. So that's one side of it. And then, of course, the other side is the impact that our numbers can have on the city, to understand that if they don't meet the demands we set, they could be in trouble. They could have problems with the smooth functioning of things. So these marches and these actions, these rallies, the ones we had at the courthouse, make a difference. They do matter. We joined in the anti-gentrification struggle. By no means are we the centerpiece or are we leading it or anything like that. There are people who've been fighting this for a long time. But when the city threatened to shut down a basketball court in Over the Rhine, right across from a school, the Rothenberg School, we saw this as an opportunity to join with those anti-gentrification forces and build a tournament, which at the face of it, just a basketball tournament, which on the face of it seems like, that's great, you guys are doing a basketball tournament. What about that? Well, the city and the developers tried to claim that that court wasn't in use. When in actuality, if you live there, you know that was the one court that families sent their younger children to because it was off the main street. It's almost a gospel law in the streets that whatever you do, you don't mess with this court. Nothing happens at that court. Shady. No shady things happen at that court. And people look over each other's kids to some degree on that court. So for that court to be the one that's chosen, it was outrageous to people. So we organized this hoop tournament, and we brought 12 teams. Half of them were, or not 12, 16 teams. Half of them were adults, half of them were 17 and under. And we raised the money to be able to buy people uniforms, to buy trophies, to buy medals. We had professional referees there. And all of these things we thought were important because this is largely a low-income area, and for people to have the opportunity to have a uniform and to win trophies and for it to be a spectacle and they get to be on the stage and know that what they're doing, even though they to varying degrees understand exactly what they're doing, but somehow them doing this is going to help protect the courts, it shines a light on the backdoor operations that happen with these developers. They do all this behind closed doors in meetings that we don't hear about or see. So to put a light on it and say, yes, they're trying to tear this down and build $400,000 units that people can't afford, and to try to destroy the community garden right next to it, this embarrassed them, publicly embarrassed them to the point where they pulled back. So, and it's not a done deal. I mean, there always will be trying to go after these areas in the city, but it gave people a chance to see that they can impact things by their presence. It was, community got involved, people brought out grills from the neighborhood, people were there, participated, and it was just a powerful, small example of what people power is. We have a campaign called CPD out of CPS, demanding that the Cincinnati Police Department be removed from Cincinnati Public Schools. This campaign is just beginning. We had 5 public meetings, and we're organizing, very serious, detailed documentation proving our point in Cincinnati that's been proven already in many other cities, which is that the school-to-prison pipeline that exists where kids, especially kids of color and especially those who are differently abled, are disciplined at a higher clip for the same offenses, just like in society as a whole, in school. So if there's a fight in school or somebody mouths off at the teacher in school, the chances of expulsion or suspension are higher for children of color than other children, especially women, young black women especially, and especially young black women who are just differently able. It works in that order of things. So part of that school-to-prison pipeline reality is where do the police fit in that? And we think they play a not helpful role. There's a lot more to say about that. I'm trying to figure out how much to put in without killing time. But, if one notion is that, well, how can the schools be safe if there's no police there? We live in a society where there's guns and drugs and that stuff makes it through school. Well, police haven't always been in public schools. Their inclusion in public schools is very recent. Cincinnati was the first place ironically, that they put police in schools. But we're for a much more organic neighborhood program, and this is not something hashed out, but this is just an example that I'm coming up with right now, that like, we have people who live in a community, especially black and poor communities, where the police tend to be in the school station. We have people who live in those areas who don't have jobs, or who are retired, but as many of us know, if you retire and you retire a working class person, you're not going to have the money you need to be able to pay for medicine, adequate nourishment, rent, and so on. So people are hurting. And the idea, one idea is like the people who live in those areas who also have an intimate knowledge of people's kids, because it's their grandkids or they're the neighbor up the street, Mr. Henderson or Ms. Smith up the street, can be a part of organizing a defense and security force at school that have the moral authority and the direct connection to help prevent bad things from happening in schools, whose hand and whose decision making will be much softer and more powerful simultaneously in doling out punishment if necessary, or de-escalating situations. That's sort of that's just one idea, but the point is, and those people could be employed, paid to do so at union scale wages, which would solve multiple problems. But that's just one idea. If you start to discuss this really, and people begin to see, yeah, it's true, we don't really need police in schools. Yeah, if somebody comes with a machine gun or a machete and starts swinging, that's a different situation. But we're talking about the daily presence of a